This is part 3 of our section on Hinduism. Now we're going to talk about some of the deities that are worshipped in Hinduism. We're going to talk about kind of the big three, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, and some of their incarnations, how they incarnate and why, and also we're going to look at their consorts, their feminine counterparts, their girlfriends and wives. We'll also have a chance to look at a couple other shakti, which are goddesses as well. I want to start with this quote here. It's from an essay called A Look at the Controversy Over Many Gods in the Hindu Religion. Now, actually, before we even look at the quote, let's start with that. Let's start with that title. That's very interesting. A controversy over many gods in the Hindu religion. Why is there a controversy? I took a class back in graduate school. It was a really interesting class on Hinduism, and the lecturer liked to talk about how before British rule, before Muslim rule, before a lot of Westerners came to India, the concept of Brahman, which we talked about in the last lecture, right? Brahman is the overlying one of the universe, was not widely taught, wasn't considered that important, really. The concept of Brahman came from the Vedas and the Upanishads, which you might remember are texts that are studied by intellectuals, by wise men, by priests. These weren't the lessons that were being taught to the common population. So the idea of Brahman existed, but it wasn't really emphasized. What more was emphasized was the particular gods and goddesses in each region, right? Remember that before Westerners came into India, there wasn't a concept of Hinduism, right? They didn't have a name for their tradition. There were many, many different traditions that interacted because the gods interacted, and different regions put devoted different members of this pantheon. And then after Muslim invaders came, and especially when England came and made India a colony of Britain, India faced this new concept, this new theory of religion set forth by Europeans, which said that Christianity, Judaism, and Islam were kind of superior religions because they had cast off the idea of polytheism. According to European intellectuals, polytheism was a sign of barbarism, of primitive culture. Like only really kind of low societies believed in lots of different gods, like a god of the sun and a goddess of the moon, and so on and so forth. No. And so, as India was under British control for, I guess it was about 2 or 3 centuries, increasingly this emphasis was put on Brahman. This idea that kind of said, actually, Hinduism at its roots isn't really polytheistic, it's monotheistic. Hindus do have the idea of one overarching reality. And over time, more and more emphasis was put on the importance of Brahman to Hindu theology. And my professor back at grad school argued that, this was kind of a defense mechanism for Hindus who were, at the time being colonized, or kind of oppressed, to kind of stand up to their colonizers and say, no, we're on equal par with you. And today you see, a lot of comparisons of Hinduism being made to monotheistic religions. Now, that's not to say it is a monotheistic religion, it's polytheistic. But a lot of Hindus today still, like to point that out. They do believe in one overarching, unseen deity. So today we're going to look at a bunch of different gods and goddesses, but I want you to keep that in mind, like how Hinduism has how it became Hinduism, how this tradition became Hinduism, and how that tradition reacted to other religions it came in contact with. And this is something we're going to see in each and every religion that we study. We're going to see it in Buddhism, we're going to see it in Christianity and Judaism, Islam, and Taoism, and Confucianism, and Shinto. Religions react to one another, and the interaction affects them. So let's look at this quote now. Let's go back to the controversy over many gods in the Hindu religion. The quote says, "The various Hindu gods all exist, but not independently. Just as the 7 colors exist within one ray of light, so do these various Hindu gods exist within the Supreme as names of his different qualities. It is for this reason that the Vedas declare God is one, whom the sages call by various names." There's a lot going on here. So what it's saying is that all these different Hindu gods, they interact, right? They're connected, very much so. As we're going to see, I'm going to tell you some stories and things of the different gods. And they compare it to a ray of light, right? One ray of light contains all the colors in the spectrum. You don't necessarily see them. If you put a crystal up to the light, it refracts and splits up all those colors. You can see all the colors in there. So the ray of light then is Brahman, and these different colors that you can see if you hold up a crystal, these are the different gods. It's interesting to me here, and you see this sometimes, that they capitalize the G in gods, which is interesting. Because in Christianity, you spell God with a capital G because that's God's name. We don't know God's name in Christianity, right? In Judaism, we don't even write out the name of God. Hinduism, though, God is not a name. It's a what. It's what these beings are. They are gods. But again, Hinduism has come into contact with English, with Western religions, and sometimes, not often, but sometimes you'll see the supreme gods with capital G, capital S, emphasizing their authority in a way. And it's interesting that this is an essay that is open to the public. Anyone can read it, and they're quoting the Vedas, which again were originally revealed to the rishis and weren't for popular consumption, right? They were for the elect few who could contemplate, who could understand their complex message and their secrets and mysteries. But things have changed quite a lot. Things do change. So with that in mind, let's take a look at some of these deities. So we're going to learn the 3 basic gods and their consorts. They are Brahma, which is different than Brahman, we'll see. Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. Their consorts, Parvati, Saraswati, and Lakshmi. Okay? These are the 6 main deities in Hinduism. And a lot of the other deities you see are incarnations of them, or they are incarnations of these other deities, right? They're all connected. And it's interesting that the different stories, the ways in which, the reasons why these different gods and goddesses will incarnate as a different god or goddess, or incarnate as a person on earth. And as we're doing this, I want you to think about their traits, okay? What kind of traits do they have? The kinds of actions they take, their personality traits, what they represent in the universe. For example, Brahma is the creator, Vishnu is the maintainer, Shiva is the destructor. Their stories, I want you we're constantly going to come back to this. What do they represent? What are their traits? It's going to be part of the discussion today. So let's start with Brahma. Brahma, the creator. There are a couple different images here of Brahma. Notice it's Brahma, not Brahman with an N. Brahman is is the one, the great one, right? Brahma is the creator god. He was once a major cultic figure. He was once, which is to say, he once had temples all over India, and he was widely worshipped. He doesn't have very many temples anymore. Very few temples to Brahma now. And even in the epics, which were relatively late, they came long after the Indus Valley and the Vedas and things like that. In the epics and the Puranas, the stories, he tends to take more of a passive role. Brahma shows up, but usually if people go to Brahma and they say, Brahma, I have this problem, and he says, well, you should go to Vishnu, or you should go to the mother goddess, or you should go to someone else. But he's still very important because he is said to have created the world at Vishnu's command. Vishnu commanded him to create the world. It said that Brahma actually was born out of a lotus, which grew out of the navel of Vishnu as he was sleeping. We'll also get to see a picture of that. I think I have a picture of that in here. So let's look at some of the iconography. Iconography, these pictures tell a lot about who these gods are. You'll notice that Brahma is often shown with 4 heads, and also often with 4 arms. A lot of the gods have 4 arms. The reason for all this is symbolic. Not to say that they literally have 4 arms or 4 heads, but this is symbolic, it's teaching. Brahma has 4 heads, it's said, because he has the 4 Vedas, and his 4 heads are reciting the Vedas. Each head is reciting the Veda at all times. They're constantly reciting the Vedas. 4 is just a very significant number in general in Hinduism. As we saw, there are 4 castes, 4 stages of life, 4 duties, 4 yogas, and also people say that the gods have 4 arms because 2 are in front, which represent their actions in this world, and 2 are in back, which represent their actions in the spiritual world. So they kind of think of it as they have a foot in each place, right? Instead of having a foot in each place, they're acting in each place, in each realm. Let's see here. Sometimes, too, the 4 hands you'll see on all the different gods will represent the mind and intellect and ego and confidence, which again are aspects of the spiritual and the material realms. He's often shown with a white beard to show his wisdom. He's old, he has wisdom. He's often shown, I don't have it here, usually he's shown riding on a swan. Most of the gods have a dahani, which is a not a dahani, a vahana, which is an animal that they are shown riding, and that animal helps represent certain of their traits. So for example, the swan represents grace and discernment, right? Those are aspects of him. He holds the Vedas, he holds the lotus, which, as I mentioned, represents karma and dharma. He carries these beads, which are prayer beads. What else? He is shown wearing a crown, which represents his authority. And the prayer beads also, I have to write it all down because there's so many things that I forget sometimes too. The prayer beads represent the substances used in the process of creation, right? All these little things that he uses in creation. He's constantly creating. So that's Brahma. Now let's look at Vishnu, the preserver. Vishnu was probably the most popular of the 3 deities in terms of his cultic following, the number of people that he has. People who worship him are called Vaishnavites. Okay. In addition to Vishnu, people also worship his incarnation Krishna, which we mentioned in the Mahabharata. So these are 2 of his incarnations. There's Rama and there's Krishna. There's 10 incarnations altogether. They are a fish, Matsya, who who helped in the story of creation, swam around the ocean and helped in the story of creation. There's the tortoise, Kurma. There's Varaha, the boar, who fought a demon who had stolen the earth. And he fought the demon, and then he took the earth. I think you can see it in this picture. He carried the earth on his tusks and put it back in the right place. There is Narasimha, the man, half lion, who an incarnation he took in order to fight another demon. These incarnations were taken in order to fight demons that the other gods couldn't defeat. Then he took the incarnation of Vamana, a dwarf, who, instead of fighting in a war, acted as a negotiator or a peacemaker between the two sides. His next incarnation was Parasrama, who was the first warrior saint. He was like a warrior philosopher, so he wasn't just all brawn. He wasn't a person who just fought. He was also very wise. And then he took the incarnation of Rama, we learned about in the Ramayana. And then he took the incarnation of Krishna. And then, this is very interesting, it used to be 9 incarnations of Vishnu, but after the spread of Buddhism, and after Buddhism started to kind of become very popular in India, the stories of Vishnu gained a 10th incarnation of Buddha. Hinduism, in response to Buddhism, kind of adopted Buddhism into the mythology of Vishnu. So the 9th incarnation used to be Kalki, but now it's Buddha. And the Kalki became the 10th incarnation of Vishnu, who has not come yet, but will come at the end of the world. He will ride on a horse, and he'll have a sword, and he's kind of Hindu version of the horseman of the apocalypse. So Kalki is the one who has not come yet, will come at the end of the age and destroy the material world so that the cycle can begin again. Because Hinduism is all about cycles and rebirth, right? So here's Rama, here's Krishna. He's seen here with Sita, who is the incarnation of Vishnu's consort, Lakshmi. And here, Lakshmi is incarnate as Radha. So what we see is that as these gods are incarnated, their consorts, their wives and girlfriends, come with them and are incarnated as well. So you've learned about Rama. Let's talk about Krishna a little bit. Krishna is extremely popular throughout India. He is a very loving, sometimes mischievous deity. He's very wise. He of course helped Arjuna on the battlefield, Prince Arjuna. But there are other stories about Krishna that he was originally born into a community of cowherders. And that he was very mischievous, and when he was younger, he would go around and he would steal the butter from all the women in the village, right? He would steal and he would hide it. And they always knew it was him, because he was the mischievous one in the village. And he would refuse to return their butter to them until they each gave him a kiss. That's the story. But of all the cowherder girls, Radha was the most beautiful, and she was his beloved. And there are all these stories about the two of them. And they're kind of, in a lot of ways, in Hindu culture, they're kind of the model sweethearts. As you can see, they loved each other dearly. Not necessarily, Shiva and his consort Parvati are more the model husband-wife, but Krishna and Radha are more the model sweethearts. You'll see that oftentimes he's shown with peacocks. And you'll notice that Vishnu, therefore, also is shown with a peacock feather in his crown, which is a reminder of the fact that one of his incarnations is Krishna. Let's talk about Vishnu. Vishnu is the preserver of the universe. So Brahma created the universe. Vishnu preserves it. He is connected with all things material. He's connected with wealth and health and longevity, with all those kinds of things, and he's said to be very kind, very patient. There's a story that one time Vishnu was sleeping in a mountain somewhere. Can't remember the context as to why he was, but a sage came by and wanted to wake him up. He came over to Vishnu and he said his name, and he did all these things to try and wake him up, and he wouldn't wake up. So finally the sage got so mad that he kicked Vishnu, and it woke him up. But instead of being angry, Vishnu was immediately concerned for the sage that he might have hurt his foot while kicking him. And so instead of being angry, Vishnu took the sage's foot in his hand and rubbed it to make sure that it was all right. Vaishnavites tend to have a very loving relationship with Vishnu. Vishnu is like a very caring, patient god, and you can see in his clothing he's dressed as a king. He's wearing lots of gold. He's wearing beautiful flowers. He has a disc here, a discus. We'll see some other gods have discuses as well. The discus represents I'm sorry, it's technically a chakra. It's like Xena, the warrior princess, had. It's a chakra. Sometimes it's called a discus. It is the purified spiritual mind, and it is also like his mastery of the spiritual mind that he can balance. And so, one of the other deities we're going to look at has a discus as well. He is a conch, which represents the power of creation. One thing we're going to see is that even though Brahma is the god of creation, and Vishnu is the preserver, and Shiva is the destroyer, still, that doesn't mean that Vishnu is not a creator in his own way. So he's creating. He has a lotus here that is unopened, which suggests a potential, the potential of creation, of enlightenment and moksha. He also has this mace right here, and the mace is power, right? All of his, not just physical power, but mental and spiritual power. The snakes are his vahana, his animal that he rides. According to legend, Vishnu was asleep on the eternal snake. I can't remember the name of the eternal snake, I'm sorry. But he was slept on the eternal snake, and he had a dream, and when he awoke, he decided to make the universe. So at that time, as he was reclining on the snake, a lotus grew out of his navel, and when the lotus opened, Brahma emerged from it, and Vishnu told Brahma to create everything. So Brahma did. I've been asked many times about why some of the deities have blue skin, why they're often shown with blue skin. I have researched it, and different sources have different reasons. Sometimes in the scriptures or the texts, different deities are said to have dark skin, and sometimes that's represented as blue. And that dark skin tends to represent their high Brahmin caste, their priestly caste, or their highbornness, I guess you could say. Sometimes dark skin is meant to signify that they're beautiful, but often it's translated into blue. And I've heard that the color blue has some symbolism itself, something to do with spiritualism or spirituality, their spirituality. But I don't know for sure. And I have a feeling that it is just a tradition that's so old, coloring Vishnu and Krishna blue, that's so old that a lot of people might have even forgotten why they do that. But yes, so Vishnu by his mace and the conch and the discus, the chakra. Okay? Then there's Shiva, destroyer. I'm sorry. this is a graphic that's not working very well. I apologize. The graphic is supposed to show his hand and the snake and the water moving instead of splashing like that. Try not to let it bother you. Shiva is the destroyer and the transformer. His worshippers are called Shaivites. So he is the third of this sort of like, I guess you could say this Hindu holy trinity. He is commonly shown with his wife Parvati and their son Ganesh, who's the remover of obstacles. You might recognize him as having an elephant head. He is probably the most. He's also very, very popular next to Vishnu. But while Vishnu is known for being very loving and very patient, Shiva is known for being a little bit harder, a little bit more impersonal, and kind of moody. There are stories of him getting very angry. You'll notice that he is dressed very simply, and that his skin is this pale white. That is actually ashes. Next week we're going to look at different Hindu practices. And one practice of the ascetics of Hindu sages is to spread ash on make a paste out of ashes and spread it all over their bodies as a reminder of death. You know, just like at funerals we say ashes to ashes, dust to dust. They spread or they spread ashes all over their body to remind themselves that this world is temporary. So he is an ascetic, while Vishnu and Krishna are often shown as kings and very rich and very elegant. Shiva is dressed as an ascetic. Notice he is dressed in a tiger skin. This is considered a great honor to be able to dress in a tiger skin. It means that he has conquered lust and desire. You'll also notice that he's wearing that coiled snake. That is kind of his one of his common symbols. And the snake and the fact that it's coiled in a circle represents eternity. He has water coming out of the top of his head. That is actually the Ganges River. Shiva is actually the source of the Ganges River. According to legend, a great king from the story of the Ramayana, wanted to honor his ancestors by bringing the heavenly river Ganges, because at that time the river Ganges was in heaven. He wanted to bring it down to earth so it could purify the land and the place where his ancestors' ashes were. And so he meditated for 1,000 years, and then the king went to Brahma, the creator, and said, and asked that in return for meditating for all this time, that the Ganges be brought down to earth. And Brahma said, we're going to have to ask Shiva. Shiva's the only one who can do that. So sure enough, yes, Shiva, and Shiva, who's, as I say, an ascetic and a meditator and a practicer of these sorts of penitent practices, like meditating for 1,000 years, was impressed with the king for his 1,000-year meditation. And he came down to earth, and the water, the Ganges, came out of his head and brought the Ganges down. One of the other things you'll notice about Shiva is he has a moon in his hair. The moon represents time. It represents the changing of time. It represents his kind of eternity. It also represents his own connection to the moon. There was a point in history in Hindu history when Shiva was associated with the moon, the god of the moon, and we still see the moon on his head. He has a trident. He always has a trident. That's the one thing that's always the same. The trident represents his authority, his power, but also the three prongs of his trident represent the body, the mind, and the spirit. Represent the trinity of gods, Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, creation, preserving and destroying, The number 3 is very important, and it's very significant, meaningful. So he's usually shown with a trident, and Vishnu with a discus, and Brahma with his four heads. What else can I say about him? This is also this is the Shiva Nadraja. This is the Lord of Dance. This is Shiva as the Lord of Dance. He's dancing the dance of destruction and creation. This circle you see is a circle of flame. It purifies, it destroys, it creates. He's standing on the back of a dwarf demon who's named Ignorance. He has his hair, which is usually matted on top of his head, the way ascetics who live out in the wilderness, usually have their hair all matted and a big bun on top of their heads. His hair has come loose, and it's going in all directions, and it's knocking the planets. It actually knocks planets and worlds off their axes. It's so strong. His hands are in specific mudras, positions, signifying fear not, offering blessings, and offering to purify people who worship him. So now let's look at the goddesses. Goddesses are called devi, or they're also called shakti, and people who worship the shakti are called shaktites. Okay? Let's look at Saraswati. Saraswati is the goddess of wisdom. She's also the consort of Brahma. She carries with her this musical instrument. Shows her she is also goddess of music and art. She's shown in a white lotus, and often shown with swans, because swan is the animal that her husband Brahma rides. And even though Brahma is not highly worshipped, Saraswati is. Saraswati is very much adored by Hindus, because again she offers wisdom, she offers art and music, and she's a very considered very graceful, lovely person, god. She also carries with her a book which represent the Vedas, just like her consort does, Brahma. She wears crystals oftentimes, which represent the power of meditation and spirituality. She oftentimes has this a container of sacred water, which represents purification and creation. And then, of course, the musical instrument, which represents arts and also sciences and learning in general. It's said that students often worship her in the hopes that she'll help them with their grades. Then there's Lakshmi, who is the consort of Vishnu, and she is the goddess of good fortune and of wealth, as I'm sure you can imagine, since Vishnu is often a kingly person, kingly character. She's a very queenly character. Like Vishnu, she is in a pink lotus. She's often surrounded by elephants, which represent her royalty, her royal status. She carries, of course, the pink lotuses. She carries in her hands, usually, sometimes she's carrying a pot which is full of nectar, the nectar of immortality. Sometimes she's carrying a fruit, which is the fruit of one's labors, because people go to her for help with work and money. So by worshiping her, she offers you the fruits of labor. She often, almost always, has gold coins pouring out of her hands. She is the goddess associated with prosperity. And she is, as I say, she is well beloved. Well beloved. Yes. Okay. Now we're going to look at Parvati. Parvati is a very interesting character, and I want to take some time to talk about her. She is the Divine Mother. Parvati is actually an incarnation of the Mahadevi, the Mother Goddess. But most commonly, she's just called Parvati. She is the wife of Shiva. She is as I say, she and Shiva are kind of the model husband and wife, which is very interesting. One might imagine that perhaps Vishnu and Lakshmi would hold that position, and in some ways they do. In some ways they do. But for the most part, Parvati is considered the goddess of love and of a healthy homestead. She is a very devout wife, as I mentioned. Her husband, Shiva, is kind of moody and difficult at times in various stories, and she is always shown as being just forever patient with him and forever devoting her time to him. And interestingly enough, in the past, there were a lot more images of her like this, who she's kind of in a power of her own sort. She's holding a trident of her own. She's on the back of a bull. Shiva rides the back of a bull. A lot of times she's shown in she's shown with white skin, showing that she, like her husband, has done ascetic work, has lived out in the wilderness and meditated, and has a lot of spiritual power of her own. But in recent history, mostly she's only ever shown with her husband or with their son Ganesh. It's an image of her nursing Ganesh. I'll tell you the story of Ganesh in a second. Let's start with Parvati. So according to one lesson, and I want to point out real quick before I forget, see on his matted hair, see the water that's coming out, you see the woman there? That's the goddess Ganga, right? The river Ganges is a manifestation of the goddess Ganga. So as an extra, lesson, an extra reminder to people looking, the water that's coming out of his head, that's the goddess Ganges. Okay. And you can see the Himalayas in the background because that's where the Ganges comes from. Okay. So according to legend, Shiva was married to his wife. I believe her name was Rita. I'm sorry, I've forgotten her name. But she died. She was living on Earth at the time. And there had been a prophecy that Shiva and his wife were going to have a son who was going to help the other gods defeat an evil demon. Off stage in another world, not on Earth, up in heaven, there was a war raging. And they needed help. They needed this son to be born so that he could help defeat this demon and the demon's army. And problem is, Shiva's wife had died and she had not reincarnated. So they go to Brahma. You always start by going to Brahma. Brahma says, well, you need to go to the mother goddess because his wife is an incarnation of the mother goddess. So they go to the mother goddess Mahadevi. And they say, we need Shiva to marry again and have the son so that we can defeat this demon. She says, okay, I'll incarnate then. I'll incarnate on Earth as Parvati, and I'll find him and I'll marry him. So Parvati is born to a king and a queen in the kingdom where Shiva is living and meditating and still in mourning for his beloved wife who died. He doesn't know she's been reincarnated. And Parvati doesn't know that she's the reincarnation of Shiva. She only knows that in her heart she's always loved Shiva and she wants to go find him. So as she grows up, she knows that one day she wants to go find Shiva, and she doesn't really understand why. Finally, she goes and she finds him, and he's meditating up in the mountains, and he's so good at meditating that he doesn't even notice her, even though she's beautiful and she's charming. He doesn't even see her. So she starts serving him. She brings some flowers, she brings some food and water, and even though he uses things, he never notices her because he has, as his tiger skin suggests, he's defeated lust and desire, so these things have no effect on him. And Parvati is just very patient. She doesn't bother him, she doesn't speak to him, she just waits and waits and waits. And the gods are watching this scene and they're saying, this can't go on forever. These two need to get together and have a son so that we could defeat this demon. So they go to the god of desire, and they say, you need to shoot him with one of your arrows, because like Cupid, the god of desire in Hinduism, has arrows that can make people fall in love. You need to get his attention and shoot him with arrows. Okay, so the god of desire shoots Shiva with this arrow, and Shiva opens his eyes and he sees this beautiful woman and he falls in love with her. But he also realizes that someone has upset his meditation. And so he opens his third eye. Do you see it right there? Sometimes Shiva is called the three-eyed one. So it's said that one spiritual energy has a source right here, and Shiva literally has an eye right there. And when that eye opens, it destroys all in its path. So he turns to see the god of desire, with his bow and arrows are out, and he opens that third eye, and he burns the god of desire up. He just burns him up. For that reason, he's often called the destroyer of desire, because he literally killed the god of desire. Well, the god of desire's wife is very upset over this. So Shiva, even though he's noticed Parvati, doesn't know yet that that's the reincarnation of his wife. So he goes back to meditating. He says, I can't. This is wrong of me to love this woman when I've lost my wife. So he goes back to meditation. While he's meditating, the wife of the god of desire comes to Parvati and tells her what happened. Parvati feels really bad, and she promises that when they get married, she will convince Shiva to bring the god of desire back, to allow him to reincarnate again. So the god of desire's wife is placated, and she goes away. Finally, the only way that poor Parvati can get Shiva's attention is by becoming ascetic herself. She gives up. You can tell she's dressed as a princess here, because as I say, she was born to a king and a queen. And she puts all of that aside, and she becomes an ascetic herself, and she meditates better than anyone else. She meditates. People come from miles around to see her meditate so strongly, and no one can distract her, no one can bother her, and everyone can tell that she is a great sage. It's like here, she's wearing plain white, well, they're lined with gold, but really they'd be plain white robes, and her skin covered in ash, just like with the ascetics. Sometimes they show her with her hair matted, just like Krishna, or just like Shiva's hair is matted. And that's the only way she can even get the attention of Shiva. So finally Shiva notices her, and finally he realizes who she is, and they marry, and they have a son who goes and defeats the demon gods. One of their other famous children is Ganesh. The story of Ganesh is that one day Parvati was out in the woods, and she was taking a bath out in a river, and some people came upon her, and they started bothering her because they saw her undressed. And she was very upset about that. So the next time she needed to bathe, she built a little boy out of clay, a little son, and she named him Ganesh. And she put him out near the path that went to where she was bathing. And she told him, make sure that no one bothers me and no one sees me. So the little boy stands there. And her husband comes along, Shiva comes along, and he wants to pass. And this little boy says, no, you can't go. You can't go see her. And Shiva says, it's my wife. Of course I'm going to go see her. And the boy says, no, you can't. And Shiva's very insulted, and being the clearly little moody person that he is, he beheads this little boy and goes and finds Parvati. Parvati immediately knows that there's something wrong when she sees her husband. She hasn't seen her son. So she runs and she finds him, her son, dead. And her grief is so great that it makes all of the gods and goddesses tremble. Her wailing is so great it makes the earth shake. And Shiva knows that now he's in trouble. There's kind of this impression that Parvati has put up with a lot, and he realizes now that she is not going to put up with anything anymore. So Shiva gathers all the gods together, and he says, look, go in. I want everyone to start walking in a direction and find me the head of the first thing you find. So people go out, and the first thing one of the gods find is a young elephant. So they behead the elephant, and they bring the elephant head back, and Shiva attaches the elephant head to the boy and brings him back to life. Brings Ganesh back to life, as you can see. It's the elephant head. And Parvati is consoled, and Ganesh becomes known as the remover of obstacles. And he is also a very popular god in Hindu lore. Anyone who's opening a business or buying a new house or starting a new school starts by giving an offering to Ganesh, because he removes obstacles. So So that's a little bit about Shiva and Parvati. They have this very interesting relationship and this very interesting story. I also want to point out really quickly, we're going to talk next week about the lingam and the yoni, which is technically a phallus and vaginal symbol, right? Is again a symbol of the fact that the man and the woman, that they are divinely connected and spiritually connected, and that's a symbol of Shiva and of Parvati. And we'll look at some of those images. So yeah, those are the three gods and their three consorts. The other two I want to show you quickly, the other two devi I want to show you who are very popular, and we're going to see pictures of them in an article, is Durga the Protectress and Kali the Destroyer of Demons. And these are incarnations of Parvati. Sometimes Kali is kind of considered to be, sometimes she's considered to be an incarnation of Parvati or of Lakshmi. Sometimes Kali is considered to be a goddess over all other goddesses. She's considered to be kind of like the mother goddess, and all goddesses come from her. There's kind of this interesting relationship. And there are places in India where Kali is worshipped very and is very popular. These two are related. Durga is an incarnation of Parvati. She gained her name from destroying a demon named Durgama. So this demon Durgama, no one could defeat him. A lot of Hindu stories start this way. There's a demon, no one can defeat him. So one of the gods or goddesses has to take a new form that can defeat the demon. In this case, Parvati took the form of Durga and defeated Durgama and gained the name Durga. And you can see she is shown as having 8 arms, one of which has a trident, which is because she is incarnation of Parvati, who is the wife of Shiva. Yeah. She's shown on the back of a tiger because she has mastery over these wild forces. She has a mace, symbol of her power. She's holding a conch because she also has the power of creation. Her hand is up like this in a show of blessing and of teaching, right? She's a teacher. And you can't really see, but she is also balancing a discus, just like Vishnu does. And again, it shows her mastery of the spirit, of spirituality of the mind, and her ability to balance these sorts of powers. And she's dressed as a queen, in red and gold, which is very beautiful. Sometimes she is shown, instead of on a tiger, she'll be shown on a lion, which shows her mastery over will and determination. And she also has, what else does she have? Sometimes she has a bow and arrow to show her energy. A lot of times she'll have like a sword or a thunderbolt. She'll be holding a thunderbolt many times to represent her determination, her firmness, her strength. Sword is a symbol of knowledge because it is very sharp, and knowledge cuts through ignorance. And that is Durga. We're going to see some more pictures of her later on, though. Now, there's another story in which there was a great army of demons, and even Durga could not defeat them. And Durga was transformed into Kali, the destroyer of demons. See, she's wearing a necklace that is the heads of demons, and she has a long red tongue because she drinks the blood of her defeated foes on the battlefield. She carries a head, which represents the defeat of the ego. A lot of times this necklace, her imagery is very interesting. Her necklace has either 108 heads or 51 heads. 108 is an auspicious number, which is the number of beads in a rosary. 51 is the number of letters in the Sanskrit alphabet and represents learning and sacred writings. Sometimes she's the mother of writing. She's often showed mostly naked because she is she's not connected with samsara, with this world, right? She's not clothed in anything of this world. She's of another world. She's not of another place. Not clothed in anything except demon heads. She has the trident because she is an incarnation of Durga, who's an incarnation of Parvati, who is married to Shiva. And if you notice, she's actually stepping on Shiva. The reason for this is that when Durga first became Kali, transformed into Kali, and was fighting all these demons, she defeated all the demons in the field, and she was so enraged, she was so berserk, that she didn't stop there. She started attacking the gods, and no one could stop her. She was just like in a trance. So they called upon Shiva to try and stop her, and she didn't recognize him. So finally, in a last-ditch effort, he laid down in front of her and allowed her to step on him. And when she stepped on him, it was a shock. She remembered that this was her husband. She was stepping on her husband. Remember, Parvati is, the model wife, the model's wife who is devoted and serves her husband. And she was shocked and ashamed of what she did. And she changed, and she slowly returned to the form of Parvati. And that was the only way to stop her. So Kali looks terrifying, I know, but to a lot of Hindus, she is a caring mother. She's only dangerous to evil things. She's only dangerous to demons, to ignorance, to sin. It's said that with her weapons she destroys sin and ignorance. And it's said that actually she's very loving to people who are devoted to her. And she's often called Mother Kali, which seems like to be a real paradox, right? You have this image, this frightening image, and then you have the reality that she is actually very loving and very kind and very merciful. It doesn't show here, but a lot of times, two of her hands will be in the mudras, the hand gestures of mercy and teaching, right? Which indicates to any follower of hers that she is not to be feared, right? She's inviting them. She's going to destroy their ignorance. She's going to destroy all the things that hold them back. Let's see here. Yeah, so I'll stop there. There's lots of different deities, lots of different gods and things. So for the discussion, the book does a good job of explaining some of these deities as well. But for the discussion, I just want you to look back at all these pictures, look at their traits, look at what they do. And going back to what we were originally talking about how all of these gods and goddesses are one color, in a rainbow. They're all connected, and they all, some way, point back to Brahman. The discussion question is, what do the different traits of the different god and goddesses say about their source, Brahman? Right? So look at these different gods and goddesses. Use at least two examples of actual gods and goddesses that we've looked at here. And what do they say about Brahman? What is Brahman? If Brahman is unknowable, what are some of... maybe we can never know. We can never say exactly what he is and does. But consider Brahman is... What do the gods and goddesses say about what Brahman is? Is Brahman loving? Is Brahman a creator or a destroyer? What are some of these traits that the Brahman has? Yeah, that's about it. Let me know if you have any questions. Next week we're going to look at practices and modern issues in Hinduism. And we're going to hear from a good friend of mine, a Hindu, who's going to talk about her own experiences as a Hindu. Okay? Thank you.